Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blazers Uprise 2023 off-season guide for our Portland Trail Blazers. This is a video where we just discuss the Blazers cap situation and who their free agents are, things like that. It's more of an informative video. It's not fully prediction-based or talking about who they're going to trade for or what free agents they're going to target. We'll discuss a little bit of the Blazers' own free agents, the likelihood of them re-signing them. But other than that, it's mostly just an informative video about the Blazers' cap situation for the 2023 offseason. Technically, the Blazers could have as little as 6 players under contract. So rosters are typically, you have to have 14 players under contract. You can have 15 if you want, and then there's room for 3 two-ways now. They bumped that up in the new CBA from 2. And so 6 players for sure under contract. And those 6 players are Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, Yusuf Nurkic, Shaedon Sharpe, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. And then they also have some dead money, still paying off $2.8 million per season to Andrew Nicholson. They stretched Eric Bledsoe and Didi Louzada last summer, so those players are both have a little bit of dead money as well. But the main free agent for the Portland Trail Blazers is going to be Jeremy Grant. He is an unrestricted free agent, but they do have full bird rights, so that means they can go over the cap to sign him from anywhere, from a minimum contract to a maximum contract, and pay him whatever they feel like he is worth. The Blazers have full bird rights on 2 other players, but these 2 are both restricted free agents if the Blazers want them to be, and that's Cam Reddish and Matisse Thybulle. So Cam Reddish's qualifying offer is about $7.7 million. Matisse Thybulle is about $6.3 million. And what that qualifying offer does, you have to offer it before free agency starts, and it's basically like a placeholder for a 1-year salary. But if they sign a contract in free agency for whatever amount, the Blazers would then have a period of 24 hours to match that contract. So it just matters. If you offer the qualifying offers, they become a restricted free agent and you can match those offers. If you don't offer it, you still have full bird rights, but then you lose that ability to match. So if they sign elsewhere, they'd be gone. So Cam Reddish is interesting because the Blazers got him in a trade for Josh Hart, but were they looking at it as an expiring contract? Will they even offer him the qualifying offer? Because Cam could accept that and have a salary of that $7.74 million next year. So I don't know if they will even offer him the qualifying offer. I would think that they maybe would look into bringing him back if it was a team-friendly contract. But I'm not sure if they're going to even offer him the qualifying offer on that one. Matisse Thybulle, on the other hand, that $6.3 million, I would think that's right around the range where they're going to look to re-sign him, hopefully. And they did give up 2 second-round picks to acquire him. And it would be kind of bad asset management, in my opinion, to give up 2 second-round picks like that and then decide to tank the rest of the season. So I would think that they would try to work out a multi-year deal with him. And I'm guessing it will be somewhere in that $6 to $7 million a season range. And we'll see about that. But as long as they offer him that qualifying offer, they could match any contract for him technically. And then they have 2 players with early bird rights, and that means you can basically sign them. It's somewhere around 11 or so million per year, so anywhere from a minimum to like 11.4 or something like that. And so those players are Justice Winslow and Drew Eubanks. They could offer them a contract without using any of their exceptions for anywhere in between that amount. But they are unrestricted free agents, so if they sign with another team, they would just be gone. The Blazers would not have a chance to match on those contracts. And then the Blazers had 3 guys they signed at the end of the season. Justin Minaya, Skylar Mays, and Chance Comanche. All those guys would be unrestricted free agents with no bird rights. So if any of those three are back next year, it would likely be either just a minimum contract or possibly a two-way in some of their cases. And then the Blazers have 4 players with either a team option for next year or a non-guaranteed amount. And the first one is Kevin Knox has a $3 million player or team option. And what that means is by June 29th, the Blazers can either pick up that $3 million contract or they can just decline it and he'd be a unrestricted free agent and likely probably sign with another team. This is where it gets kind of tricky with talking about like what contracts they'll keep and stuff, because they don't have a lot of tradable contracts. And a $3 million contract isn't big, but it could, when you add it with another contract, help match salary in a trade for the Blazers. So if I'm just guessing, I'm thinking that the Blazers, obviously if they made a trade sometime before now and the date when they have to pick up the option, they would just guarantee the contract and then use it in a trade. If not, they might still pick it up just to have that option to use his salary as a trade piece. A $3 million expiring contract, most teams wouldn't care about taking that on as long as the salaries match. So, yeah, I think that they probably end up keeping Knox, or he'll be a part of a trade before the date of June 29th when they have to decide that. And then the Blazers have 3 players with non-guaranteed contracts. The first is Trendon Watford. He's scheduled to make $1.836 million next year. I mean, there's no reason for them not to take him. He's pretty cheap, a decent young player. So yeah, there's really no value in letting him walk because the minimum salary is pretty close to that. Even if you signed a 1 or 2 year player, you're saving a few $100,000. So I don't think it's worth letting Trendon go for that. He's got a really good contract with another year after this one. Also, that's non-guaranteed for just under $2 million. So it's just a bargain of a deal. Even if he's not really a rotation player next year, it's still a good contract to have. If he is a rotation player, I mean, any player that's making less than $2 million and is a rotation player is obviously a steal. So they'll definitely pick that up, in my opinion. And then Jabari Walker has a $400,000 partially guaranteed contract. But if that's picked up, he's making about $1.7 million. Again, young guy, like basically a minimum contract. So I don't see any reason why the Blazers would just let him walk, especially when you consider they'd have to pay him $400,000 to go away. It's almost a fourth of his contract, so very likely, unless he's part of a trade, that he'll be back as well. And then they did pick up Nate Williams. His contract is for the same amount as Jabari's, but he doesn't have any guaranteed money. When they signed him at the end of the season, they signed him for 2 years, so that goes into next season. But they could cut him and not owe him anything. Again, maybe just a case where they need just a little tiny bit more salary to match a contract and a trade, and he's an easy throw-in since he makes the minimum. But yeah, it's probably a case of he'll either be cut or used in a trade. But maybe he'd be back for the G League team that's starting next year, or something like that. But I'm guessing they probably wouldn't just pick up his contract outright unless he really shows out in summer league or something like that. The Blazers, of course, ended up with the number 3 pick in the lottery. That comes with a cap hold of $9,625,800 this summer. The 23rd pick comes with a cap hold of $2,805,240. So just a little bit of money towards their books. It doesn't matter if you sign them or not, that those are cap holds towards their salary cap number, unless they trade those picks outright. A big question we get often on this channel is how much cap space could the Blazers get theoretically if they let all their free agents walk? Would it be enough to sign a big-time free agent, and how would that work? So, mention the 6 players they have under contract for sure. Dame, Ant, Nurk, Sharp, Nas, and Keon. Let's say they traded the 3rd pick away for future picks or no salary back. They traded the 23rd pick for the Bulls, the pick they owe the Bulls for that back. So they don't end up with any salary from first-round draft picks, because second-round draft picks just count nothing towards the cap until they actually sign a contract. So those are fine. Like the 43rd pick doesn't count against their cap initially. So they just have those 6 players under contract, dump both draft picks, and then let everyone walk. So Jeremy Grant gone, Cam Reddish gone, Matisse Thybulle gone, Justice Winslow gone, Kevin Knox gone, Drew Eubanks gone, Trendon Watford gone, Jabari Walker gone, and Nate Williams gone. And then everyone else, like the 3 guys they signed at the end of the year, Mania, Mays, and Comanche, all gone, right? So they'd have the 6 players under contract, and they would actually need a bunch of minimum contracts as well. So you'd have holds for each spot between 6 and 12 players that you have to account for. So when figuring out cap space, in this particular example, you would have 6 minimum cap holds. All right, so we let everyone walk. We traded both picks. That would leave the Blazers with $20,575,217 to spend in free agency. Okay, so a little over $20 million. The Blazers have a long history of, failures or not being able to sign many players in free agency. So, to me, Jeremy Grant alone is a better option than having $20 million in free agency. So that right there pretty much is a non-starter for me. Now maybe if something happened to where Dame asked out or something and you weren't going to re-sign Jeremy, then maybe that makes sense to just let him walk instead of pay him. But you're basically letting Jeremy Grant walk for nothing, and just so you can have about $20 million in cap space. To me, not worth it. And also losing your chance to re-sign Thybulle and some of those other guys. So, that's pretty much a no-go for me. I can understand if someone thinks that they could do something with that, but if history is anything, it's just not going to lead to anything better than Jeremy Grant. So I'd much rather just re-sign Grant, in my opinion, and act as a team over the cap, but we'll get to more of that in a minute. Now, let's say we kept the 3rd pick, right, but we traded 23 for our pick back, or maybe a future pick or something. Then the Blazers would have a little over $12 million in cap space. This summer, the mid-level exception for a non-tax-paying team, you would get hard capped if you use this, but as long as you stayed under $169 million, you would have $12.2 million mid-level exception to use in free agency. So basically, you'd be letting Grant go to have less cap space than you would keeping Grant. So anyone who thinks that Grant should just be let go, like I understand if you don't think he's worth the amount they're probably going to have to pay him, but you're not going to be able to replace him, and you have a little bit less cap space than you would keeping him. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's just the reality of the situation. So, and that's with trading their 23rd pick. So once again, in my opinion, not really worth it. And then if you kept the 23rd pick in addition to the 3rd pick and let all your free agents walk, you have about $10.3 million in cap space, or to be more exact, $10,350,035. So once again, that's less than that $12.2 million that the mid-level exception would be. So you're looking at letting everyone walk so you could have less ability or less flexibility to sign players in trade. Makes no sense. So, yes, this is why even if you are like just gung ho about free agency and want to maximize cap space, it really doesn't make sense to let our own free agents go just to try to sign more players. All right, so now let's look at a situation where maybe they have to stay under the tax line. How would that look like? What could they do to fill out a roster and stay under that tax, even with re-signing like a Jeremy Grant? So we've already mentioned the 6 players you have under contract and then the 2 draft picks. Let's say they picked up that $3 million team option for Kevin Knox. They pick up the non-guaranteed of Watford, Walker, and Williams. And then offer Matisse Seibel the qualifying offer. And, let's just say he signs for somewhere, the first year starting salary is somewhere in that range of $6.22 million. And then Jeremy Grant re-signs. Let's just ballpark first year of his 4 or 5 year deal being $28 million. Okay, so maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more, but let's just say for this conversation it's about $28 million. Okay, and then you throw in the dead money from Nicholson, Bledsoe, and Luzada, and the luxury tax line, if you're paying the tax, is $162 million this year. So that roster I just laid out, obviously there was no free agents there, but the Blazers would have 14 players, and their total salary would be $161,389,935. So roughly about $600,000 under that luxury tax with a full roster and keeping both draft picks. Dame's probably not happy at this point because they didn't get any free agents or make any trades. But that would be a way to, keep a somewhat competitive team and stay under the tax. Not saying that's the route I would go, just laying out that scenario. But you could take away players. So let's just say you cut Nate Williams and you've signed, a free agent minimum contract or whatever. So you can do a little bit of rearranging there. It still works under that luxury tax number. So if they're going to do that, that's what's likely going to happen, something really small like that. Now, the thing you really want to look at is, so we're just under 162 million. The tax apron, which would be the line if you use the full mid-level exception or the biannual exception, you would get hard capped at that $169 million number. So the Blazers would be roughly 7.6 million under that number. And so they could, if they were willing to go into the tax, use slightly more than the tax mid-level exception, which is only $5 million now. So they could use 7.6 million, hard cap themselves at the tax apron, and sign someone in free agency for that 7.6 million. And of course, any trades they make, if they send out more money than they bring back in, that helps a lot because that reduces the total cap number. So the only thing that could change that the other way, even if they did take back less money, is if they sent out like 4 players for one, and then only had 11 players under contract instead of 14, then obviously you'd have to account for those 3 roster spots to get to the 14 minimum. So the Blazers could find a way to bring back Grant, sign Thibault, and possibly free up the full mid-level exception of $12.2 million. Just have to maybe work around the edges, maybe trade a Keon out for nothing coming back, or maybe, just a slightly smaller salary or something. But yeah, there's ways to work around that. Now, what they could just do is sign someone to the tax mid-level exception of that $5 million, and they would still be under the tax apron. They would be in the tax, but then they could, they wouldn't be hard capped at that lower tax apron, and there's no way for them to get to the second tax apron, which they'd be hard capped at. So yeah, it doesn't really come into play, the second hard cap, but then they could basically still have a lot of wiggle room that they don't currently have if they get hard capped. And we know they got hard capped last year when they signed Gary Payton II, and that kind of restricted them from doing a lot of trades. So not sure if they'll duplicate that by just trying to sign the best player, but trying to stay under that tax apron. Now, if they have to stay under the luxury tax, they're probably not going to be able to sign anyone good this summer. So it's one of those things where if you're committed to going all in and winning, you kind of have to probably go into that tax this summer. And hopefully, if that's the route they take, they're not also trying to do it cheaply, because it doesn't really make sense to go all in for Dame if you're not also committed to at least going into the tax a little bit, to make sure you can add that one more player in free agency. If you let Thibault walk, though, that's another, $6.2 million. So you could probably get the full mid-level exception too if you didn't re-sign Thibault, or any of these players that signed for less. So maybe Jeremy Grant's starting salary is 26 or 27 million the first year, and maybe you sign Matisse for 5 million or something. That's a good way to find an extra few million to spend in free agency as well. But yeah, the most they could do pretty much in any scenario outside of the doomsday one, which isn't going to happen, is about 12.2 million. And it would hard cap them, and it would be kind of tough to maneuver. So it's most likely going to be some combination of what we just talked about. If they didn't use a mid-level exception or the biennial exception or anything and stayed away from getting hard capped, they could also re-sign Justice Winslow for any amount up to like 11 or 12 million. They could re-sign Drew Eubanks then, go deep into the tax. They could still re-sign Cam Reddish too. And they could just continue to go as deep into the tax as they felt comfortable doing. And not getting hard capped is important. It's going to be very difficult to maneuver starting, this year it starts a little bit, but fully next year in 2024, that the rules for getting deep into the tax severely hamper any team from making moves. So it's going to be difficult to do things, but this 1 year you kind of have a little bit of a grace period. So if they're going for it, they could do that. And also, it might seem weird to give a bunch of players contracts, maybe even slightly more. Like, let's just say they gave Winslow and Eubanks like 1 year or 2 year, like 7 million per year contracts or something. What that could be indicating is them trying to get several contracts that they could then trade at the deadline. Because right now they have their big contracts with like Dame and Anthony, Nurk, and stuff like that. But then they have a bunch of smaller contracts with like Keon and if they picked up Knox, Nas, Sharp, they're all, in that lower range. So it's tough to match salary on a lot of players. So yeah, there might be some maneuvering there just to get a decent amount of contracts that you could combine together to match salary in a trade. But it's difficult to know exactly what they'll do. But yeah, that the salary cap is 134 million this year. The luxury tax is 162 million. It's going to keep going up. They did agree to smooth it out in this new CBA, so it can never be more than 10% of an increase. So we're not going to have exactly a repeat ever of the 2016 offseason, in which the cap jumped so much. Almost every team had a ton of cap space and just went crazy signing players. So they wanted to avoid that back then, but the NBA Players Association voted against it, and it ended up, kind of hurting everyone that summer, including the players. So they agreed to smooth it this year and not ever have too much of an increase. But it's still a pretty good jump to that 134 million. And you do have a lot of wiggle room between that number and the luxury tax. Will Jody agree to pay the tax this year? That's something we're gonna find out. Well, it's getting down to time here. We're gonna find out soon because in about 3 weeks we'll have the draft already over. We'll have free agency already a few days in, so most of the big signings will have already happened. And yeah, so the Blazers will pretty much know the direction they're headed. Of course, things could always change at some point later in the offseason, but most of the stuff gets done relatively around the draft and the start of free agency. And right here on Blazers Uprise, we will be having full coverage of all of those events, starting with the draft on June 22nd. It's a Thursday night. We will be here for all 60 picks. And of course, if the Blazers make a trade, we'll be going in depth on that. But we'll also break down each pick and what we feel about the selections, other trades that are made, comment on those. And then for free agency, we'll be here pretty much all day. And then like last year when we sign off and then the Blazers make another signing of Gary Payton II, we'll come right back on and talk about it more. So yeah, we're pretty much on the air all day for the start of free agency last year. And then we came back on the next day, the second day of free agency. That's when we talked about stuff like Nurkic signing and things like that. So yeah, just a lot of fun. Those are some of Tori and my favorite days of the year, is just days where there's a lot of action, a lot of things happening, a lot of signings, trades, all that kind of stuff. And it's just fun to break it down and react live to those. So looking forward to those, and I hope you will all join us for those events, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about the cap situation, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.